Hello YouTube, it's Mike. All right, I just wanted to quickly jump on and respond to a very interesting question left on one of the video comment sections. It's a question that I've gotten many times. It is a question I myself have asked or wondered, whether consciously or unconsciously, on some level or other, at some point in time. And that is the question: what happens when two empaths come together? Codependents. So specifically, this channel, I've just changed the name of my channel around. What did I change it to? Hang on, let me take a look. I just changed the name of my channel to, hang on, where's my channel? It's no longer Surviving BPD Relationship Breakup. And the reason for that is because I survived that. I'm no longer in the breakup phase. That was a year and a half ago. It's now Surviving BPD and Narc Relationship Trauma. That's the name of my new channel. And so that's what I deal with here. This channel is devoted to people who have been in relationships with borderlines and or narcissists, I'm here to share with you my experience of what I did to completely heal from that relationship, and the things that you can do also. If you do what I do, you'll get what I get. If you want to completely heal from, if you've been damaged by a relationship with a narcissist or a borderline, there is healing. Before I go any further, I am not a therapist, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a licensed mental health professional or counselor of any kind. I am simply somebody who survived. And so that's what that's what I focus on. For those of you watching who are borderlines, there is healing for you. But that isn't necessarily what I deal with here. I deal with the other side of the healing. The healing for you would be to go and get a therapist who specializes in DBT therapy and work your ass off. If I were to give you something to, in my estimation, my uneducated guess would be, three things would be: get DBT therapy and go to group therapy as well, and work that. I think there's a workbook where you can do exercises or homework or something that you do on a daily basis. You do those three things like your life depends on it. My understanding is that over time you will learn how to manage your symptoms and be able to have functioning, loving relationships. All right, so back to the question. Here's the question. I will read it. And this isn't the first time I've seen this question. It's been in some form or other. And let's see. Person asks, very simply, are codependents attracted to other codependents? If you're new to my channel, the codependent is just simply the partner of a narcissist or a borderline. And I want to briefly give you my my new definition of that. So definition, there's codependence. The dynamic is a relationship dynamic where one person has to take on extra responsibilities in order to keep the dysfunctional relationship going. So you end up taking more responsibilities in the relationship than your partner in order to offset their dysfunction. The word codependent is often misunderstood. When I tell people, if you've been in a relationship with a borderline for, even a short amount of time, by definition, you're a codependent. People oftentimes get really bent out of shape. They don't want to hear that. And that's partly, there's an unconscious reason, but the conscious reason is they don't like the word dependent. And they will go ad nauseum explaining to me how they aren't dependent on anybody. I'm the one that held down the job. I'm the one that did this. And what they're not understanding is that there's this syllable before the word dependent, which is co. And the history behind this word codependent is it's about 100 years old. It goes back to the beginning of Alcoholics Anonymous. And back then, 100 years ago in the 1930s, there was men and women alcoholics, but the majority of alcoholics were men. And so you had men who were businessmen or whomever, and the stresses of being a man, etc. And you had a lot of these male alcoholics who were dependent on alcohol, and they had their wives. So their wives were the ones that were maybe holding down a second job, taking care of the kids, dragging the alcoholic out of the street and washing him up and taking care of him. They weren't the dependent, but they were commingled. They were the co-dependent. So if you look at it that way, the caretaker of the dysfunctional person. That's all the word codependent means. It means that you are the one who is the caretaker of the dysfunctional one. When I explain it to you that way, you're going to go, well, yeah, that's right. That's who I am. I'm not dependent on anybody. Now, that's up for debate, but that's what the word codependent means. You're not the dependent, you're the co-dependent. So if you've been in a relationship with a narcissist or a borderline, by definition, you are a codependent. And so what happens when two codependents get together? And first, let me address the question that was written, because it really got my attention. Because there's a difference. There's the question which is, what happens when two codependents get together in a relationship? And that shows a misunderstanding of what codependence is. If you ask that question, you don't understand the dynamic, which is part of the problem. If you understood the dynamic, you never would have gotten involved to begin with. So that's okay. But the question at hand, which is, are codependents attracted to other codependents? Now, the person doesn't say why, but let's see, did they respond? Oh, they did respond. Let me read the response here. So the response is, no real reason. First off, I don't believe that for a second. Nobody asks these questions for no reason. It's a very codependent thing to do. Oh, nothing's fine. I don't need anything. I'm fine. Oh, nothing. No, of course there was a reason. I'm just really intrigued by the dynamics of different personalities and how they gravitate towards each other. All intellectual nonsense. I don't believe that. I think there's a deeper reason. I am codependent and was with a BPD for years and fortunately healed from it. Well, good for you. I'm dating a great gal now and I just wonder if she has some disorder. So you don't think maybe that there's maybe a little bit of doubt as to whether or not you're completely healed? Because if you're completely healed, then you're not going to attract somebody else with a disorder. A very codependent thing to do. Downplay your own needs, downplay your own codependence, because the dynamic of the codependent is the codependent, the disease they suffer from is the disease of perfection. So before I get any further, let me continue to give you the dynamics of codependence. So you have the dependent, which in this case we're talking about the borderline. We would all agree that borderlines are dependent on their partner to function. They're dependent on their partner for their narcissistic supply. So the borderline is the dependent. You are the person taking care of them. You are the co-dependent. In order to be the codependent, the dynamic of codependence is that the relationship is based on a transactional relationship. It means that your worth, your entire worth in the relationship is based on what you do for the dependent. It is not based in any way on who you are. At no point does the dependent look to you and say, you know what? I can totally accept you with all of your faults and limitations. I just love you for who you are, and how can I best be there for you? I want to be there for you unconditionally. No. The dependent says, you are here to fulfill all of these needs and you have to do them perfectly. And I might change my mind tomorrow about what those needs are. And you better be quick on your toes to change with me and follow all of my demands to the letter. Otherwise, I will flip out, have a temper tantrum, leave you, ghost you, cheat on you. This is the dynamic of the codependent dynamic, is that your worth is based 100% on what you do, not who you are. Part of that, if you are the person who is not the dependent, if you are not the borderline, you are the person who has to be perfect. So the only reason that you are attracted to the borderline to begin with is because your perfection, because you walk around, you suffer from this need to be perfect because you have been trained by your family of origin to be perfect in order to be loved. And so you need to actually find somebody with whom you can perfectly meet their needs so that then you will feel that you have value. That's why you sought out the borderline. So one of the things that the codependent does is the codependent has no faults. Yes, I had that problem, but I overcame it very quickly. I'm in control now. Control is big. I'm in control of my thoughts and my feelings, and I'm in control of this relationship, and I can control you and fix you. What do you need? I will take care of everything. This is the codependent dynamic, and I'm hearing this in what you're saying. So this person, they know who they are. It makes me wonder if you've done the four things, because if you've done the four things, you don't talk this way. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you are cured. Maybe you are healed from the past relationship, but then what are you doing with somebody you can't tell if they have a personality disorder or not? So you say, I ask, why are you asking the question? And you say, I'm just really intrigued by, no reason really, I'm just intrigued by the dynamics of different personalities and how they gravitate towards each other. I am codependent and was with a BPD for years and fortunately healed from it. I am dating a great gal now and I just wonder if she has some disorder. That's the one problem. When you start dating after you broke up with a BPD, you almost are waiting for the hammer to fall. Laugh out loud. I have spoken to my girlfriend about prior relationship and she's very understanding and sensitive to what I dealt with. I would be curious if others struggle with a healthy relationship after a BPD relationship. So again, you're not healed. I'm not judging you. I'm not saying that you have to be 100% healed. I'm not saying that, you can't have some issue, but, I think part of the healing is in being honest. I would have more sympathy, more respect. I'm not finding the right word. I would find more, connection to your comment if you had a little more humility about it. And you were like, yeah, I was in a really nasty relationship with a borderline. I'm a codependent. I'm still healing from it. I've healed a lot, but I'm still healing from it. And in fact, I'm a little worried about this. Is this too good to be true? Does she have some issues? Then, now you're not so perfect anymore. Right? So that tells me you haven't done the four things. Correct me if I'm wrong. You know who you are. Perhaps you did, perhaps you didn't. And then goes on to say, I love your channel because it puts things into perspective when you're in the BPD relationship. As you know, you just don't see what's going on. So, look, it's okay not to be completely healed yet. But what you're describing is the PTSD. You still have PTSD because you can't tell whether the woman you're with or not is, has some kind of disorder, which is a borderline tendency. You now have a borderline tendency. I did as well. You now don't know if you can trust your own feelings, your own thoughts. That's a sign that there's still some healing that needs to get done. Do the four things. But let me get back to the question. Are codependents attracted to other codependents? people have asked that before. The reason why I wondered, why are you asking that, is because people have asked that before because they want to find a codependent. They've been with the borderline, they've been with the narcissist, and so they think if I find another victim, another survivor, that person will be able to meet my needs. That person will be safe, that person won't harm me, and that person will, shower me with love the way I did to the borderline. And in this case, if I'm hearing you right, you're wondering, am I actually attracted to another codependent, or is this somebody who's got a disorder? So here's the answer that, I gave you an answer which I said you probably aren't going to like my answer, which is that the short answer is yes, codependents are attracted to other codependents. In fact, codependents are only attracted to other codependents. What? I thought the codependent was the helpless victim. Codependence is a dynamic. It's a dynamic where your worth, your value, your lovability is based on what you do, not who you are. What does that describe? That describes the borderline. The borderline suffers from chronic codependence. That is the narcissist. The narcissist is completely dependent on narcissistic supply. They are completely dependent on other people's opinions of them. And in order, in their mind, to be loved, they also have to be perfect. Unlike the codependent victim who needs to be perfect in supplying the narcissist needs to be so perfect that you worship them. And if you're not worshiping them in their grandiosity, then you're destroying their fantasy that they're trying to paste onto objective reality, and then they must discard you and destroy you. That's where their abuse comes in. They abuse you when you don't line up with their internal fantasy. You're now a cog in their animation, and you're an animation that's got its own life, and you're doing your own thing, and you're not. You're supposed to follow your script. You're not following the script I made for you. A really good example of this is to watch Dr. Death on Netflix. Excellent example. You'll see in his interactions with his girlfriends and wives and whatever, that at some point he will start telling them in one way or another how they're supposed to act within his fantasy. That he's not connected to objective reality, that he's got this fantasy, and his struggle, if you watch the whole thing, this whole thing is about a narcissist struggling to paste on his fantasy onto objective reality, and it's not sticking, it's not working. The guy's a horrible, doesn't even know, has some kind of problem where he's got some kind of spatial problem where he literally can't tell the difference between bone and nerve tissue, and so he's just slicing these people up, But when you ask him, he says, that was perfect. I did a perfect job. That operation went perfectly. It's because in his fantasy it did. In his fantasy, once he's done, slicing the person up and then he walks away, he creates this fantasy of him doing this perfect job, and he was this perfect surgeon. And then when people come to him and say, yeah, but the patient is dying, his response is, that can't be possible. I still have this fantasy where I was perfect. It must be somebody else's fault. It was wasn't me. It was the anesthesiologist. It was the nurse that closed him up. It was, the waiter in the hotel restaurant down the street. It wasn't me. I was perfect. I know, because I remember. I have this fantasy. It was perfect. This is codependence. So the answer to the question is, are codependents attracted to other codependents? They are exclusively attracted to codependents. The question is, which side of the codependent dance are you on? The other thing that happens a lot is even if you get two victims, you get two people who are victimized by a narcissist. If they get together, guess what's going to happen? One of them is going to take on the role of the victim, and one is going to take on the role of the controller, the abuser. They may not yell at you, they may not beat you up, they may not do the things that the narcissist did, but they will control you. And there will still be a relationship based on the transactional relationship of each person being loved based on what they do, not on who they are. But understand that narcissistic abuse is a dance. The person who's the victim is the person who demands. Listen to what I'm saying. The person who is the victim is the person who demands that the other person give them a reason to be perfect in their supply, in their behavior, in their nurturing. Their entire value is based on the perfection of their nurturing. And they usually nurture for passive-aggressive reasons. They don't nurture people out of truly unconditional desire to completely. It doesn't mean that they don't have it, but their codependent desire to nurture is not coming from an unconditional desire to love and accept somebody for who they are. Their need to nurture is they need to be, their supply is to have somebody allow them to nurture them and to take care of them. I'll give you an example. This was right after my divorce, and I was looking online at dating sites, and I was talking to somebody, some other part of the country, as it turns out. And they said, you really seem to have your life together. You seem so, I forget what it was, but basically you seem so put together. There would be no need for me. And I thought about that, and I thought, what a strange thing to say. Because, so what you're saying is you need me to be fucked up so that I'll need you, and then you'll feel as though you have some value. You feel that you'll be, because I need you. Anyway. Obvious that person was a codependent, but that, she spelled out exactly what the codependent, the victim side of the dance is, which is you need to be abusive and irrational and needy so that I can get my worth by tending to your dysfunction. So that's the short answer to that question is, are codependents attracted to each other? Absolutely, exclusively. But the other thing is, before I shut up about this part, the other thing about that is you don't want that. It sounds great on paper because you see yourself as a nurturer and a healer, and you're now in pain and you want somebody to come and nurture and heal you. And so you think that's what's going to fix you. So you look for that. But the problem is that when people bond on their wounds, you end up with two wounded people continuing to wound each other. This is why if you remember, this is why you got together with your borderline to begin with. When you got together with your borderline, they had a deep wound and they understood you, and you had this deep wound and you understood them, and there was this deep bond. This is the twin flame experience, which is just wound bonding. This is the I've known you my whole life, or we're soulmates from previous lives. You finish my thoughts. You're the other half. You complete me. That's usually coming from two people whose wounds resonate and they're able to project on each other. And of course that won't work. You get two wounds come together. Two wounds don't heal. All right? All right. So I'm happy to take any questions if there are any. I'm happy if there aren't any because it's very late at night. I don't see anything. Let me refresh the page in case there is anybody here watching and listening. Just refreshing the page. Okay. So somebody did show up here. Nope, I don't see a question here. Landon says, wow, catching a live show for the first time, Mike. Appreciate all the content you've been putting out there. It's all been greatly helpful during the time of healing since the X 5 weeks ago. I'm happy to hear that. Carmen Mulder. It's been almost a year out from the toxic relationship. I'm not healed. Thank you for your honesty. I relate. Yet and won't even try to put myself out there. This is a long healing journey. Yes, it can be. So what are the 4 things? Here's what I did to completely heal from the relationship. I'm not healed from my family of origin dysfunctional codependent issues, but here's what's important about this. This is extremely important. When you are able to disconnect yourself from the delusion, because if you are still in pain over the borderline or the narcissist, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years later, if you're still in pain, it means that you are lost. You are wrapped up in a delusion. You are suffering not from them. You are suffering from your transference. What is transference? Transference is something that happens to psychologists and psychiatrists. And it has to happen in order for a psychologist or a psychiatrist to do their job. It has to happen. When the patient comes in, they will transfer their feelings from their parents onto the therapist. So it's very common for patients to fall in love with their therapist right off the bat. This is transference. Therapists are trained to deal with this. This is why you're not allowed to have any personal relationships with your therapist for a year, after you stop seeing them. Because it's abusive to take advantage of a patient's transference, because you can abuse them and you can harm them. When you are with a borderline or a narcissist, it's projection and transference. The pain, the gripping pain, the deep wound that you carry with you months, weeks, years afterwards is not from the person you were in a relationship with, no matter how abusive they were. They did damage, but what they really did was they played the role your unconscious needed. Your unconscious needed them to play out or even expand upon the abuse that you suffered so that you could relive that wound in an unconscious attempt to heal it. That's what that's all about. When you get to the place where you are able to completely heal from that, which means that you're no longer under the spell of your own transference, visionary hallucination. And you really, because this is what happened with me. After I did the work, I realized, wow, man, all that time I thought I was in love with her, I wasn't. It was pure transference. It was pure projection on my part. It had nothing to do with her. When I look back on it in hindsight, there was two wounded people projecting on each other. There was nothing real going on there. So when you heal, you'll see that. It doesn't matter if you've been with them 10, 20, 30 years. You will see that the most deeply wounding aspect of it was all transference. Then, when you become healed from that, you may heal some of the original wound. In fact, you probably will. But you'll then bring your focus back to the original issue from your mom or your dad or whatever it was. I'm experiencing this now. This past week has been really a huge revelation for me, and I'm going deep into some of the really important episodes in my childhood and early adulthood where my parents, really did their job of programming me and, really going into that pain and experiencing that and releasing that. So that's why it's important. When I tell you to do these 4 things to heal from that relationship, that is absolutely essential, because when you are healed from that relationship, then you're going to be actually able, with the help of your therapist and your sponsor, to go into your childhood issues and heal them. If you don't, and you don't resolve the lingering delusion, which is your pain, your rumination, your sadness, your anger, your resentment towards your narcissistic ex, If you don't heal that, you are doomed to either continue to relive it inside, or you will attract somebody else, which is why the guy who asked the question, why he was asking that question, he hasn't healed yet, because he still can't see through his own. He's trying to figure out, does this person have a disorder, or means he hasn't fixed that. He hasn't healed that yet. So the 4 things to do that, here's how you heal, is you go full no contact with your borderline or your narcissist. That means you make it impossible for them to contact you. 2, you work all 12 steps of coda.org with a sponsor. You can't do it alone. You can't read it off of the website. You have to do it with somebody. And then you sponsor someone else. If you do that, you can then say you did thing number 2. Thing number 3 is work with a therapist who understands cluster B personality disorders, borderline narcissists. And then 4, do some kind of daily meditation. That is what I did. I will say this every time. When I no longer need to write this out, I'll stop making videos. Because when everybody who comes onto my channel does those 4 things, my job will be done and I can move on and do something else. So let's see. Tanisha Lulu question. Mike, what do you think are some key flags for a toxic person to look out for when online dating? So Tanisha, I think I answered this question previously. There's no superficial magical thing. The attraction between the codependent and the abuser, the attraction is on an unconscious level. Unconscious means you're not conscious of it. You know that when you meet somebody and there's that attraction. I don't know what it is about that person, or maybe you do know what it is. It's the way that their body is, or the way that they look, or the way that they smile, or the way that they smell. That's all nonsense. The thing that's attractive to you, that makes you excited, is the unconscious connection. You're not aware. So you're asking me, how can I be consciously aware of somebody who's dangerous? Well, if you're consciously aware of somebody who's dangerous, then they're not an unconscious danger for you. It's the ones that you think are really wonderful. And the red flags, you can look for them, and we could list hundreds and thousands of them, and maybe that'll help you, maybe it won't. But for the most part, you're not going to see those things anyway. So the way to avoid it is to do the 4 things. You do the 4 things, you no longer have a wound, or at least the wound is no longer being projected out in such a way that it attracts these people, and you are no longer unconsciously attracted to them. When you work on your wound and heal your wound, you will understand it, which means you will see it coming. This is why, most of the time, sometimes I'm off, but most of the time I know just from a few words or from the sentence or a phrase, I know exactly what's going on with somebody because I've been there. So I know when somebody's asking a question, like oftentimes people will say, what happens when 2 codependents get together? I know that person is saying, I want to find a codependent because, the borderline hurt me and I want to find somebody who's going to take care of my wound. And, they don't understand how dangerous that is, that thought process. But it's coming from their need to fix themselves as opposed to heal, right? So that's just one example. So the key flags are you. The key flag is, I want to throw myself head over heels for this person. I want to sleep with them within 10 seconds. I want to give them a key to my apartment. I want to marry them. The flags are within you. If you're not healed, you're going to find yourself going, I don't know, everything's happening so fast, or, one thing led to another. I love that phrase, I don't know if people do it now, but, back in my day, when girls, had one night stands and they didn't want to look cheap or sleazy, they would say, well, it was just The way he looked at me, and one thing led to another, which is another way of saying I couldn't wait to tear his clothes off. Oh, but and when girls would say, this was said to me a couple times, I don't normally do this kind of thing. I mean, the flags are within you. So to answer your question, I could give you a bunch of things, but if you don't do the work on yourself, it won't matter. Because con men, confidence men, con jobs, a confidence job, people who are dangerous know how to con you. They'll tell you what you need to hear and the way you need to hear it. If what you do, and you're not healed, but you say, I'm not going to sleep with somebody until I've dated them 10 times. Maybe after the 10th time, I'll know. The con man will go, okay, great, 10 dates. Okay, so I'm going to tell this person everything. I'll even study them and figure out. But if you don't have that need within you, if you don't have that wound within you, there's nothing for them to con you. They won't even be attracted to you. Okay? So I appreciate the question, but the answer to your question isn't trying to figure them out. The answer to your question is to do the work on yourself, and then you won't be attracted to them, and they won't be attracted to you, and you won't have to think about it. I don't think about it. Let's see what else. Carmen Mulder says, I hear you. I'm dealing with my family of origin trauma now. The relationship opened up everything. What a blessing, actually. So, Carmen, the reason why I'm stopping on that is because that's a familiar phrase. It is what I was saying, but what I'm not sure about is how you've come into contact with it. For instance, when I go ballistic on the twin flame scenario. I made a video saying that the whole twin flame thing is really just narcissism. And that people who buy into the whole twin flame 5D thing, they're actually, if they're not covert narcs, they're bordering on narcissism. But they will use that phrase. They will say, no, actually, I'm really glad I met my narcissistic abuser because it opened things up and now I know more about myself than I would have if I hadn't gotten involved. And that's a twisting of the truth. So I'm a little bit worried about that. It makes me want to ask you, have you done the 4 things? Because having the wound reopened and then feeling that and living that isn't what I'm talking about. Staying in the wound. In a video that I recorded, which I haven't uploaded yet, talking about the phrase that's really popular out there called narcissistic abuse syndrome. When you go and research that, they'll tell you the way to overcome that is to learn everything you can about narcissism, which I totally disagree with. I mean, we talk about borderlines and narcissists and stuff like that, but I don't do that because I'm here telling you if you can figure that out, it's that that's just to wake you up to realize you need to do the 4 things to heal yourself. When you can realize, oh, I'm in a relationship with somebody who has a destructive narcissistic mental illness. Oh, I need to go fix myself now. I need to go focus on me now. That's the whole point. Whereas they're saying, no, you focus on them, which is a very codependent thing to do, what they do, how they think, master narcissism, and then you'll be able to destroy it, which is not true. The more you focus on narcissism, the more you're going to attract them. And tell yourself, what you want all along. But so when I hear that the relationship opened up everything, what a blessing, actually, it makes me wonder, are you saying that from the perspective of you're doing the 4 things, or are you saying that from the perspective of the twin flame, I'm indulging in the drama and the chaos? So I honestly don't know, but it's got me a little bit worried. So Sezgin, what is the name? Ilter? I can't read that. Am I losing my eyesight? I'm going to be 58 in a little over a month. Um, so he's explaining his scenario. So my suggestion to you is do the 4 things that are listed directly underneath your comment, um, so that you can be bulletproof. As long as you're doing those 4 things, I'll say this to you guys, as long as you're doing the 4 things with everything you have, even if you're unhealed, even if you're still codependent and broken and, you know, all of that, as long as you're doing the 4 things, you're bulletproof. You stop doing the 4 things, then you open yourself up. As long as you're doing the 4 things, no borderline or narcissist can touch you. They won't be interested in you. You won't be attracted to them. Even if you are attracted to them, you will be doing things that will prevent you from taking action on that. 4 things make you bulletproof. And Sergen's going to tell us all the drama and the chaos, which narcissistic people do. So nothing new about that. My hair is off to you. I hope you get through it. Now, if you have a question, Sezgin, the best way to do that is what you see above you. People write the word question in all caps. They don't write the whole question in all caps. They just write the word question in all caps. That way I will see it in case I'm just flipping through a lot of comments, because a lot of people just dump comments and I miss the questions. So in the future, please do that so I can see your question. You say, do you have any suggestions how to keep kids safe in this situation? First off, let me just say that I am not a lawyer, so I don't know the law when it comes to that. Here's my thing. Here's my feeling about this. Now, I don't have kids. That's by choice. But I feel when, you know, if somebody is coming out of a relationship with a borderline, for example, and they don't have any kids, I'm going to be a lot more tolerant of their resistance and them not wanting to do this, and I don't want to do those 4 things, and I don't need to do that, or they take their time and they go back and forth, and I'm going to have a lot more tolerance for that. But once there are kids involved, all my tolerance goes out the window, because all of your drama and your chaos is now meaningless. There are helpless victims. We as adults are not helpless victims. We were if we grew up in dysfunctional families, but we're adults now. And so as adults, we don't have the option to act like helpless victims. And I get very self-righteously indignant when I hear somebody say something to the effect of, well, I don't want to pay for a lawyer, you know, it's going to cost a lot of money. I mean, you don't understand what it's like, but, you know, like, I don't care. You're the one that chose to have unprotected sex with a borderline. Maybe you didn't know they were a borderline or a narcissist then, but now you do. And so you have an innocent victim there that you are responsible for bringing into this world. If you want to know how borderlines are created, by this very method, a young, innocent child being raised by a cluster B, an untreated cluster B. That's how you end up with borderlines. That's how you end up with narcissists. So there's no, for me, I have no tolerance for people who have had kids with borderlines or narcissists. And, you know, if you now want to prevent somebody else from being completely destroyed, or if you want to prevent the creation of another monster, then get your ass into therapy, get your ass to a lawyer, and get custody of those kids. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know how that's done. People say, in my country, I can't. I'm like, you know, I don't know. I don't know the hoops that you have to jump through. But there's no amount of excuses that you're going to give me that's going to make me feel that you are any less responsible now for your kids. You can't focus on your trauma and your pain and going. You now have to save that kid. You have to get that kid out of that lethal situation. So get your ass to a lawyer, get your ass to a therapist, and work with the therapist and the lawyer to get custody of that kid. And stay no contact, which means you do not communicate with your borderline ex or the baby mama or baby daddy. You have the lawyer communicate exclusively and be the go-between. Oh, that's expensive. Well, you should have thought of that before you had unprotected sex with somebody who had a mental illness. Oh, I didn't know they had a mental illness. I feel for you. Well, now you do. And there's an innocent little being there. And you have the responsibility to clean up that mess because you helped create it. That's, you're asking my opinion? My opinion is how to deal with the problem. That's it. Get your ass to a lawyer and a therapist and get those kids out of there. And if you can't pull it off, at least if you've done everything in your power, at least you can then say, I did my best. That's probably not what you wanted to hear, right? Let's see. Because that's the one thing, it's hard for me to listen to parents complain about having kids, especially single parents. I'm a single parent, and it's like, yeah, and? Who forced you to have unprotected sex? That was a choice you made. I mean, that's why I don't have kids. I don't have kids because even when I was married or even when I was, in a committed relationship and there were women that wanted to have kids with me, if I needed to wear 2 condoms, I would have. Because my thought process has always been, I am not going to bring a kid into this world until I am prepared to spend the next 20 years at least completely focused on that being's well-being. And I wasn't. I still had things that I wanted to do. So the majority of people out there should not be having kids, in my opinion. Sorry, I went off, but that's my answer to your question, says Gin. Carmen Mulder, thanks for the 4 ways. You shared this with me in the beginning of my journey to healing. I'm doing 1, 2, and 3. How do you meditate? Carmen, do you see all these links? I don't know where they are. Let me see. I got to get the thing up here. You see these links here? These are all links to, that's all I talk about on the other channel is spirituality, meditation, qigong. There are literally thousands of ways to meditate. All you have to do is go looking for it. So go look for a method of meditation that you like, whether it's walking in the woods or Zen meditation or yoga or mantra meditation or Tai Chi or Qigong. There's no shortage of ways to do it. Just put some effort to it, you'll be able to find it. There's no one way to meditate. That's a natural question. How do you meditate? As though there's one way. There isn't. There's thousands of ways to meditate. I myself cannot sit there and empty my mind. I can't do it. My mind races too much. I have to do active things. I have to do breathing and moving, and then I can sit. So if you're like me, find some kind of movement meditation or mantra or something like that. What else? Kim J. question. When a borderline plans to marry someone, does the borderline predict that the marriage may not last that long and go sour someday in the future? So Kim J., I already know you haven't done the 4 things. You know how I know? Because your question is completely focused on the borderline. When you are focused on yourself, the questions that I like are when you ask me about how you can heal. Kim J., there is nothing I can say to you that's going to be helpful to you. If I say to you, because you're asking me, does the borderline predict the marriage may not last? If I say to you, yes, the borderline is asking you to marry them and knows it won't last, how does that help you? If I say to you, no, the borderline, when they ask you to marry them, absolutely believes it's going to last and they're planning on it, how does that help you? The only reason you would ask that question is because you're trying to figure out what you can do to make your relationship with the borderline work. And I'm not here to help you with that. If you listen to me or click the join button, I'm going to tell you that it's hopeless. And your question shows that you don't understand what borderlines are. If you replace the word borderline with schizophrenic lunatic, now try the question. When a schizophrenic lunatic who can't tell the difference between time and space, the person who's hallucinating that giant crab people are walking all over their skin, when the schizophrenic lunatic plans to marry someone, does the schizophrenic lunatic predict that the marriage may not last that long and go sour someday? You wouldn't ask that question, because it's like, it doesn't matter what the schizophrenic lunatic thinks. They're not in reality. They have a mental illness. They're not rational. Why would you ask that question? So to ask this question about the borderline means that you're wanting me to tell you that the borderline is rational. And the only reason you would ask me to do that is because on an unconscious level, you want them to be rational so that you can make it work. Whenever people ask questions about why does the borderline do this? Does the borderline think this way? Do they, when you start asking me the whys about why borderlines do this, and what are they thinking when they do this? You're asking me because you want to control the borderline. Because what you want, every time, it doesn't matter if borderline or not. Why doesn't my girlfriend want to marry me? That question. This happens a lot when people break up with each other. Even when they're normal relationships, people will say, I need some closure. Why did you break up with me? I just need to know why. Why did you cheat on me? I just need to know why. It's a meaningless question. Because the question is, you're trying to gain information so that you can control them later, or control them by changing yourself. You think, if I could just change myself, then they won't do this bad thing, or I can get them to do what I want. It's manipulative. So Kim J, what does it matter why a borderline does what they do? They have a mental illness. They are not, when it comes to romance, they are not functioning in the same world that you are. They are not rational. So ask questions about how you can heal. So I already know you're not doing the 4 things, Kim J. If you do the 4 things, you'll never ask a question like that again. At least not after you've done it for a while. All right, so as is my way, I am usually not giving people the answers that they want to hear. But that's the whole point of this channel. I'm not here to get you to like me, although I want you to like me, of course. I'm not here to get you to like me. I'm here to tell you the truth as I understand it. And if the medicine, you don't want to take the medicine, you're free not to take it. You can put the antibiotics aside and stay infected if you want. Or you're welcome to go get a second opinion. Go talk to another therapist or life coach or super empath or whatever your choice is, and see if you find something else that works for you. This is what works for me. I'm convinced it is the best way. I think, at least in my case, it's the only way. The 4 things are the only way to guarantee healing in the relationship. If something else comes along that works, I'll let you know. And I'm okay with being wrong, but if it works, don't fix it. It works. Not doing it doesn't work. So there you go. Do with it what you will. I wish you all the best. Stay safe, and I will see you next time I see you.